course, I ask everyone not to be a nitwit. Now, what does a nit really mean? A nit is a fancy word for the egg casing of a lice. Let me just say something about that word lice. I don't know that there's a word in the English language that causes more disgust and creepiness. And that's the real problem when it comes to lice. It has nothing to do with health issues because lice are one of the few organisms in the world that are completely harmless to humanity. The lice bug can only live on skin flakes that have been shed from a human scalp, not from the skin anywhere else on the body, and not from skin flakes from any other animal. And keep in mind, that means they live completely on the skin flakes, not our blood, so they only eat that which we're throwing away anyway, flakes that we shed off of our scalp. But if you think about the word lice, it doesn't usually conjure up a sense of harmlessness. As we mentioned before, it makes people really feel creepy. And I'm not sure why that is, but it is a very deeply held sense that probably goes back thousands of years. So we're not going to try to get rid of that sense of disgust, but we are going to try to put it into context. And that context is that these bugs are really harmless. So what is a louse? What are lice? As I mentioned, they're a type of bug. They're an insect. They've been around for, a very long time, as long as humans have been around. And so they know how to get from head to head quite well. But the first thing I think to be surprised about is just how poorly they do outside the human scalp. If you take one louse, which is the singular form of the word, which is plural, lice, if you take one of these lice and put them on a table, they'll become unable to function or reproduce or do anything at all within an hour or two, and they'll be dead, 100% of them, by 24 to 48 hours after being removed from the scalp. So the first thing I want to say is that these are very weak organisms away from our scalps, and that means they can really only be transmitted from person to person pretty much by direct contact of scalp to scalp. So let's think about that for a minute. If one of these lice bugs gets on a hat or a pillow and sits there for a couple hours before touching another person's head, that bug won't be able to go anywhere. It won't be able to spread. Studies have been done to measure how lice spread, and we find only about 2% of lice spread by hats and pillows. 98% of lice move around when kids touch heads to head. So that's good news for anyone whose child's been diagnosed with lice. This whole notion of having to sanitize the whole home just reflects again more our basic human revulsion at these creatures and not so much any actual threat that they pose. Now let's talk about the difference between lice and nits and how you know if you really have them, how long they sit on your scalp, and these sorts of considerations. Lice are very hard to see. They've been blending in for millions of years and they've really mastered it. So it's very hard to see lice, and since they do no harm, it's very hard to know that they're present. We think that by the time you see the eggs laid on the hair and those become visible, the lice have been in your child's head for a month or so, maybe even more. Lice can only lay eggs right where the hair shaft really touches the scalp, and they have to hatch before the hair grows about half a centimeter, which is a very small fraction of an inch. Once the hair shaft grows 5 millimeters or half a centimeter, that egg grows with the shaft and is hatched or dead by that point. So anytime you see a little egg casing glued to the hair, which is how they're laid, they're cemented onto the hair shaft. Once it's 5 millimeters or more from the scalp, you don't have to worry about it carrying any lice anymore. And that's where most of these egg casings, which are called nits, are found. So if you think about it, in a classroom, a child's been identified as having lice, that's usually done because we see egg casings well away from the scalp, otherwise they're very hard to see. And that child may not be contagious anymore for lice. And if he or she is, they've been contagious for about a month. This explains why the no-knit policies of school fame is so at odds with the basic biology, the basic facts of these critters. You could have a very skilled professional stand guard at a classroom and keep any child who has visible nits away from school and have no impact on the spread of lice. We know this because most of us with children in grade school either have children or know of children who've been excluded from school, and yet the lice outbreak, which typically lasts several months in a classroom, is never abated, continues no matter what control measures are placed. And the reason is the vast majority of children who have lice on their head will never be found to have them. They come to school, the spread continues, nits are removed in those in whom they're visible. That has no impact on the spread of lice because most nits are dead by the time we see them. Now, if you think about that fact, you have to really think about the impact of a child who's been identified as having lice and presenting a danger to the other kids in the classroom. Since this approach has almost no impact on the spread of lice, we consider it a very mild form of abuse of the child. It's sort of nasty to call them out, let everyone know they have lice, and kick them out of school, especially since it doesn't benefit the child or the classroom. So we stand with the American Academy of Pediatrics and every infectious disease expert who's ever studied lice in saying, no, children should not be excluded from school who have lice. They should be treated. Families should be told that this has been discovered in a confidential way. They should not be excluded from school. Well, what about treatment? This is a very important point. Lice are harmless, so it doesn't make any sense to expose your child to treatments that actually cause harm. Why trade a harmless situation for a harmful situation? And this is where treatments come in. The mainstay of treatments in the United States for many years has been insecticides. Some of these are actually known to cause brain damage in children and affect their ability to think later in life. The most famous of them is something called Ovid or malathion, which is available in the United States as a prescription, as are several other insecticides. But malathion is known to belong to a class of pesticides where there's abundant evidence that it can cause learning disabilities in developing brains. 2 insecticides available over the counter, Nix and Rid, have been used for a long time, and lice have learned how not to be killed by them. 98% of lice in the United States have had no impact on treatment with Nix and Rid for many years. We at Advanced Pediatrics strongly recommend that families not use Nix and Rid, A, because they don't work, and B, because they're insecticides which could cause harm to a developing brain. We certainly advise against the use of prescription, higher strength pesticides on your child's head of all places for a condition that, factually speaking, is completely harmless. But we do appreciate that lice are creepy and you like to get rid of them. So what's the best solution? We think it lies in use of something called Cetaphil, which, yes, is a skin lotion. It turns out you can rub your child's hair and scalp with Cetaphil and blow dry it into a nice hard shell. And if you do that once a week for 3 weeks, you will have a nearly 100% cure rate. That's perhaps 100 times more effective than the over-the-counter insecticides that are available on the market. That is hundreds of times more effective than the pesticides available on the market today, and so much safer. So we recommend Cetaphil, blow dry to a good hard shell, and then do that once a week for 3 weeks, and that lice infestation will be gone. Of course, as we have learned about the classroom dynamics of lice in kids' hair, getting rid of lice in one child's hair has no impact on anyone else. And since most lice infestations are invisible and never found out on a child, your child's treated head can get reinfested when they go back in that classroom that's going to be spreading lice for several months, no matter what anyone does. So to recap, lice are very common. They've been around for millions of years. They've adapted so well to being on our scalp that no one can see them very easily. The eggs have to die, the eggs have to hatch or they'll die before the hair grows 5 millimeters from the scalp. So most of the little egg casings or nits that we see 5 millimeters or more from the surface of the scalp are dead and offer no benefit in removal. Most importantly, lice are harmless, and the best treatment should be harmless. That would be Cetaphil hardened into a case by blow drying once a week for 3 weeks. And that should really cover anything you need to know about lice. They've been around, they're harmless, they spread only by direct contact, they die within a day of being off your child's head, and the treatment is very easy by use of a Cetaphil casing. So I wish everyone luck as they enjoy their children through the grade school years, and especially if they confront an outbreak of lice in their classroom, be prepared for it lasting for a while, but know that your child's under no harm, and we certainly don't want our panic and fear to infect our children. So stay calm, know that you're safe, know that it's easy to get rid of them, and that a classroom takes a few months to clear out the arrival of any lice. Good luck to you and to your health. This is Dr. Arthur Lavin with real answers from Dr. Lavin.